Hey guys, so a short disclaimer before we start the video. Obviously, this is being released in October and is sort of semi-part of the Shocktober thing. And that is because it's a follow-up to my previous episode on Jinn possession, which fits, I think, pretty neatly into that category. And also because the video, in broad strokes, deals with Jinn possession in different ways. But with that said, I do not want to give the impression that Zar itself is something scary or spooky. But I realized this as I was making the video that maybe people will sort of misunderstand that. I don't want to misrepresent Zar or Zar practitioners as being spooky or scary. This is an important spiritual thing for many people in this region, and so I just felt like I needed to point out that I do not want to give that particular impression about Zar in general. And you'll notice also that I don't use the usual Shocktober intro for the video, partly as a result of that I want to sort of stay away from giving too much of that impression. So if you want to see it as part of the whole Shocktober thing, then you kind of can. I mean, there's the candles and stuff in the background still, and the whole aesthetic is there, but at the same time, I felt like I needed to point out that the Zar itself should not be... It's not part of Shocktober in that case because of Zar, because of the ritual, but because of the general topic of Jinn possession. Secondly, I need to point out that because the sources that I've used have primarily focused on Egypt, that means that the information and the stuff I convey in the video is also mostly particular to Egypt. The general stuff about Zar is true across the board, but there are some details that might differ. Like, for example, I say that most of Zar practitioners are Muslim. That's true in Egypt. I'm not entirely sure that's necessarily true in Ethiopia, for example. Or the questions of gender, that most practitioners are women. This is true in Egypt, according to the sources, but it could be true elsewhere too, but I just also wanted to sort of put that out there, that the details of this stuff is particular to Egypt because of the sources that I've used. With all that said, and with these disclaimers in mind, I hope you enjoyed the video. In my previous episodes, we have determined that belief in Jinn, or spirits, in the Islamic and Middle Eastern world is a widespread thing. And also that it is a common belief that such Jinn can actually possess human beings. Claimed cases of Jinn possession, while contested, can be found across history and in various places today. And when such a thing happens, there are different ways of dealing with it. The most common would be different forms of ruqya, where the possessing spirit is removed through rituals involving Quranic recitation or things like amulets and talismans. But in places like Egypt, there is an entirely different way of dealing with spirit possession that have developed over the centuries and which is known as Zar, a kind of ritual complex or tradition that involves stories about spirits, rituals to appease those spirits, and a whole ritual community built around the relationship between humans and the possessing Jinn. This is a tradition that involves many different aspects and fields of interest, from religion and mysticism / Sufism to music and dance to ritualization and social cohesion and social belonging, and it's a really fascinating and prominent actually part of the religious and ritual life of many people in regions like Egypt and Sudan and Ethiopia. So today, let's dive into the world of Zar. Zar is a widespread ritual complex that is especially common today in the Red Sea region, such as in Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan, but also in places such as Arabia and Iran. Essentially, it is a tradition of spirit possession and different ways of dealing with it, which includes ecstatic music and dancing, social groups, and a hierarchy of ritual specialists that aim to help people afflicted with spirits to ease their troubles and get rid of the issue. It's uncertain where Zar originated, with various different theories and claims. Many claim that it essentially originated in Ethiopia, and it seems certain enough that it made its way into Egypt from Ethiopia in particular around the early 19th century. But others, including in Ethiopia itself, will claim that it actually comes from Yemen originally. In any case, the earliest record of the word Zar being mentioned as referring to possessing spirits come from a text in Ge'ez in Ethiopia in the 16th century. And the earliest description of a Zar ritual was also recorded in that country in the early 19th century. The word Zar is also unclear in terms of its etymology and origin. It seems unlikely that it comes from an Arabic word, and there have been various theories about it. But in the tradition we are talking about today, the word is used in a variety of different ways. In its most basic sense, Zar is a possessing spirit, a kind of being that can possess human beings. In the Islamic context, it has been categorized as a specific type of jinn, and sometimes in particular with what is called the qareen, or constant companion, mentioned in the Quran. The Zar spirits are numerous and are often divided into lines of families who live in societies just like human beings, and they can come into contact with humans in different ways. Similar to what we described in the previous episode about general jinn possession, these possessions can be the result of various different things, from somehow offending the spirit in question, or encountering a particularly horny spirit in some cases, or being the result of some sort of occult or magical practice. At this point then, one can become possessed, and the tradition describes this through metaphors of clothing. So it's like the spirit is wearing the person just like a person would wear clothes. And this can result in various different symptoms, which includes, according to the scholar Hager al-Hadidi, quote, headaches, continuous rheumatic pain, weight loss, nausea, loss of appetite, infertility, and miscarriage. A wide range of psychological behaviors, including unexplainable bouts of anger and aggression, and states of sadness or fear, may also be symptomatic of Zar possession. As we'll talk about a bit more later on, certain behaviors and things that are considered taboo in these societies, such as homosexuality, for instance, could also be connected to Zar possession in different ways, and cultic initiation into the Zar ritual complex, into the Zar community, also serves in many ways as a kind of way of acceptance of these social divergences. So that is the basic meaning of the word Zar, as the name for the possessing spirits that are at its core. But Zar is also used for the ritual itself, the ritual aimed at helping people from possession, as well as a general name for the whole tradition or complex itself. When a person becomes quote-unquote worn by a Zar spirit, they are referred to with words like me'afret, maryub, or menzar. And since the symptoms are pretty unpleasant, you'd of course want to get rid of them. If regular methods don't help to alleviate their troubles, and the person suspects they might be dealing with a Zar possession, they can then turn to the Zar specialist and their rituals. Zar includes a whole hierarchy of professionals and specialists, including professional musicians. A ritual specialist or leader is often referred to as a sheikh or sheikha in the case of women, and indeed they are mostly women. If a person then thinks that they might be afflicted with a Zar spirit, they will go through a sometimes long process of identifying the spirit in question. You see, the Zar spirits are very much individuals with personalities and ethnicities and other things. And a sheikha can use different sorts of incense, play different kinds of music, or call upon the spirit in different ways to make it appear, so to say, through various kinds of divination. Once the spirit is identified, the afflicted person can then enter into the Zar community. As you can see, it isn't just temporary rituals or general ideas about the spirits, but a whole initiatory tradition. You become initiated into the Zar tradition and their community, and it is thus something that stays with you for the rest of your life. Unlike other types of jinn or other ideas about jinn, Zar spirits cannot be exorcised. In other words, if you're possessed by a Zar spirit, This means you're stuck with that spirit for the rest of your life. And this is something that is really unique about Zar in particular compared to other forms of dealing with Jinn possession, is that rather than trying to get rid of the Jinns that are possessing people, the Zar rituals and initiation is instead aimed at appeasing the spirits and reconciliation with the spirits. When the initiate goes through the initiation ritual, incense will be burned, music will be played, and animals will be sacrificed, after which the initiate will isolate themselves for a period, eating only from this sacrificed meat. All this is in order to make the spirit happy and reconcile it with the host, thereby removing the negative effects of the possession and hopefully enhancing any positive effect that it might have. After this, they have entered into the Zar community and will continue to do rituals regularly, both in private and with the community, with the same purpose in mind of keeping the spirit happy. There are various kinds of Zar paraphernalia, such as amulets or clothing that might be worn because the particular spirit that is possessing them enjoys those particular kinds of clothes or amulets or whatever. Like we said, the Zar spirits have certain personalities and likes. There are different kinds of Zar music, for instance, and different spirits will respond to different kinds of music depending on its preferences. This will often be connected to their ethnicity or nationality, so that a spirit from Sudan will respond to music and rhythms with Sudanese origins and so on. In terms of their public ritual, this is perhaps the most well-known aspect of Zar. Usually on a weekly basis, a Zar community will meet for what is known as Hadra, or gathering, to perform a ritual focused on music and dancing. The Zar community has a whole host of professional musicians who, unlike the congregation as a whole, are usually male and will specialize in different styles and genres of music. During the Hadra, ecstatic music will be played and the participants can start dancing almost uncontrollably like in a trance. This is seen as the possessing spirit taking over the person and dancing to the particular kind of music that they like. For initiates, this Hadra ritual is a way of keeping the spirits happy. By playing their preferred music and allowing it to take over by dancing, they are appeasing the spirit. But the Hadra is also open to the public, and many non-initiates will participate as audience members. The most common purpose for a non-initiate to participate is to identify whether or not they are in fact possessed by a Zar spirit, and to identify the spirit in particular. If they start responding to a specific song, then one can more easily identify who it is that's wearing you, so to say, since, again, these Zar spirits have different personalities and prefer different kinds of music. But others also just participate because they are interested, they are curious, they just want to see the spectacle, or perhaps they've been invited by a friend, for instance. So as you can see, Zar represents a unique and different way of dealing with Jinn possession. It's a complex ritual tradition where initiated members will continuously throughout their lives perform these different rituals to appease and reconcile with their spirits rather than to completely get rid of them through exorcisms. As you can imagine, Zar also serves a very significant social function and role in society where people who maybe don't fit in different ways can find a sense of social belonging and comfort. It is worth pointing out, and indeed a very significant fact, that the vast majority of Zar practitioners and initiates are women. Like we said, the professional musicians are often men, but the rest of the people connected to this ritual complex are usually women. The ritual specialists or sheikhs are mostly women, and it is women that are drawn to become initiated. There are men that participate too, of course, but they are vastly outnumbered by women. And even then, the men have come into contact with Zar through wives, sisters, or in general by hearing about it from women. What are the reasons for this? What are some of the psychological and social functions and aspects of Zar? Well, it clearly serves a social function to initiated individuals who are going through various troubles by becoming part of a fellowship where those experiences are not necessarily shunned or attempted to get rid of, but rather to reconcile and affirm many feelings and experiences. This becomes especially important for women who, after all, have to go through several difficult physical and mental challenges throughout life that men are usually spared. Indeed, it has been observed that instances of Zar spiritual possessions often coincide with major events in the lives of women. such as puberty and the first menstrual blood, marriage, birthing, and menopause. These events often come with certain crises for the person, which can manifest as a spirit possession. The purpose of Zar thus partly becomes a kind of social support network for women going through these crises, as well as to, quote, ground a person in specific times and events associated with affliction and healing. In a way, the Zar spirits here become almost like personifications of these life crises and anxieties, and Zar provides a clear way of embodying and making those feelings real, as well as providing a path of healing through reconciliation. With this in mind, it becomes pretty clear why this phenomenon is so common with women. In the words of Hadidi, quote, "The path of Zar provides a technique for empowering and energizing adepts, particularly women, to deal with their lives by learning to listen to and trust their feelings, by drawing upon their intuitive and innate powers of imagination, as well as their sensuous experience and knowledge of the world." As we said, Zar is quite a widespread practice in places like Egypt and Sudan, and it is a significant, albeit minor, aspect of the social fabric of these societies. Its relationship to the wider religious traditions that dominate the region is also an interesting factor. It is true that many Muslims, particularly modernists, have criticized Zar as un-Islamic or as a kind of heresy and superstition. At the same time, the majority of Zar practitioners are Muslim, and often devout practicing Muslims too. It's also quite common that Zar affiliates are also connected to Sufism, since both have come to represent a kind of traditional form of religion or culture as opposed to the modernist or fundamentalist strands of Islam that have grown stronger in the last century. In short, Zar is a fascinating example of a spirit possession tradition or ritual complex that has some really unique and fascinating characteristics. It intersects with many other aspects of religion and history and culture, such as questions of gender and embodiment, trauma, and social belonging. There is, of course, so much more to say about Zar, and I have in no way done it justice in this very short episode. So, as always, I encourage you to keep researching yourself, and I will also, as always, leave sources and recommended readings in the description. When I am particularly indebted to a specific author or book, I like to give them a special shout out, and in this case, I have based most of this episode on the research and writings of Hager al-Hadidi, who has written an excellent book called Zar, Spirit Possession, Music, and Healing Rituals in Egypt. This book is based on her own research and personal experiences, and if you're interested in the topic, I can highly recommend this book in particular. And I will see you next time.